What's the closest you ever came to dying? Story 1. Lost a lot of blood after giving birth. Didn't have the placenta fully detach. Had to have it pulled out. Answer. Was about to comment this. I lost 2.1 liters within minutes. Before I knew it, doctors and nurses rushing around putting in IVs and a hand in my uterus pulling placenta out. Part of me still has nightmares about how easily it could have been different. Like I was so tired after birth, I didn't notice anything was wrong and I could have just decided to take a nap. Would have left 2 children without a mother. Story 2. Heat stroke in an attic in July. Came to in the passenger seat of my work van with no shirt with my boss driving me to the ER. Apparently, there was a few minutes before where I was up and talking to people. I have no recollection of it. Answer. I used to work as a cable guy. We did quite a bit of attic work. Once the temp reached a certain degrees, we could decline going into an attic and reschedule for a cooler day. I always took a cold drink in the attic with me and a hand towel to wipe the sweat. Worked slowly with frequent breaks. It's way too easy to overheat in an attic. Folks don't realize how hot it gets up there. Story 3. I got hit by car full force when I was 9 and flew in air at least 10 ft and landed on concrete cement. I was unconscious and family thought I was dead. I remember waking when medics got there and walked away with few scratches. Answer. Something similar happened to me when I was 13. I was jaywalking and got hit by a minivan. One minute, my friend was yelling at me to look out. The next, I saw sky and felt a bump on my hip. After that, I woke up to paramedics strapping me onto a stretcher, warning me not to move. I had a concussion, sprained foot, and many bumps and bruises, but survived. To this day, I am still a little scared of cars. I am also a very cautious street crosser now. Edited to add that the guy who hit me was also hit a few years after that. He was driving over train tracks, didn't see the train coming, and it nearly smashed his car in. He too survived, but I often think him. I hope his driving skills improved. Story 4. At Ground Zero on 911 when the planes hit. Through both collapses. Pretty fudge-up experience. Walked away without a scratch, at least in the moment. Edited to add, thank you all for the kind words of support and inquiries about my health. I have some related health issues, but I'm doing okay. Apologies for not sharing more. Answer. I was nearby that morning. My dad had just flown into NYC the night of the 10th, and I lived up on the Dutchess-Putnam County line, so I took the train in to see him at my aunt's apartment on Stuyvesant Oval off of 14th in Peter Cooper Village. I got into town at Grand Central and there were no cabs. I heard about the towers being hit by jets. I had to walk from 42nd all the way down to her place, and the smoke and dust were horrible. A smell I am never going to forget. I asked them if they wanted to come up to the farm in Dutchess because they both had breathing problems, but they did not want to leave the city. I only stayed a while. I knew it was going to be a long walk back to Grand Central. I got on the last train before they ended service till further notice. My aunt died the following year of respiratory failure, and Dad died the following year also of respiratory failure. I am now 67 and dying of respiratory illnesses. I don't think it is linked to that day, though. More likely the Marlboros. Story 5. I fell down a flight of stairs yesterday at work. Bad. Could have been so much worse. Thankfully, just a mangled shoulder. Answer. Stairs genuinely make me nervous for this reason. I have really bad balance and coordination, so I have fallen down the stairs more times than I can count. One time during middle school, I tripped going down the stairs and slid down them on my knees as if I was giving the sickest guitar solo just to crash into the lockers on the opposite side of the hallway once it made it all the way down. It's a miracle I'm still alive with how often I accidentally harm myself. Story 6. On one tipsy evening, I jumped on a moving train cutting through Jack London Square. I crossed it and jumped off the other, said, in order to get the bar faster. In midair, I realized how fast I was moving. I landed rolled, and when the train passed, my friend said, "God damn it, I was looking for you. Under the train, I thought you died." That's the point in my life I started slowing down on Crazy Shoot. I was 26. Story 7. My appendix burst, and the infection spread through my body very quickly. I had a fever of 105 and felt like I was dying. Also, I was pregnant at the time, so I felt like shoot anyway. I had an emergency surgery and spent the next 2 weeks in the hospital. Answer, same. Well, without the pregnancy. Went to the doctor with stomach pain. They said I was fine. Then, a week later, I was out by myself, felt a pop, and had to crawl into a shop. They phoned an ambulance, and the doctor was chill until they must have got some tests back and were like, "Oh, fudge, you need surgery right now." Was in hospital for over a month because the appendix bursting led to my entire insides basically getting infected. Lost about 6 stone in that time, best diet ever. Story 8. Gallbladder burst last year, went by ambulance. They had me sitting in the waiting room. Almost died. Story 9. Severe dehydration as an infant back in the 70s. I had picked some bug up at daycare. Doctor told my parents to consider calling in a priest for last rites. Story 10. Before I was born, my twin and I had several in utero health conditions to the point the doctor recommended abortion. My parents said no. We were born 7 weeks early, weighed 3 lbs, me, and 4 lbs, her. I spent at least a month in NICU while she passed within a week of being born. Story 11. 3 weeks ago, Widowmaker heart attack. Never had one before. The cardiologist pulled no punches. Dude, you could have died. He got my attention, now taking a medley of meds and eating the heart-healthy diet. Story 12. EF5 tornado. Luckily, we live in the Midwest, so a lot of people had basements. Longest minute of my life. Answer. An EF3 completely destroyed both of my neighbors' houses back in the 90s and left ours untouched right in the middle, save a few roof shingles tossed about. Central Kentucky. I remember when, I assume, it was passing over our house. We hadn't yet gone to the basement because we didn't have early enough warning. There was a howling blast of wind against the windows, and then an utterly eerie silence such that you could literally hear a pin drop. Then the howling again. No buildup, just immediate chaos. Thankfully, everyone survived. Story 13. January 5th of this year. Truck blew a stop sign and hit me on my motorcycle from the side. Ended up losing my right foot and about half of my tib fib. Shattered the bones. Open femur fracture, torn aorta, 3 fractured ribs. Needed 10 blood transfusions, crashed 2 times. Was teetering on the edge of passing for several hours. Answer. I sold my bike last summer. It's just too dangerous and not enjoyable because you have to be hyper-vigilant as opposed to cautious. I've ridden for 50 years and only had a couple minor spills with no injuries except someone cut me off in a parking lot and I fell over and broke my foot. Luckily, I rode with full gear, including armored street bike boots. Story 14. Nearly ended up under the wheels of a semi when I unwisely decided to take a highway ride by motorbike in a less developed country. Story 15. When I was 5 years old, my family and their friends went out for a boating trip. We found a nice shaded spot underneath the cliff, and in a freak accident, a huge boulder fell off on top of me and another 5-year-old girl. The boulder was so big and heavy that 4 grown men kept trying to push it off of us, and it wouldn't budge, so they had to dig us out. By the time they got us out, the other girl had already sadly passed on from the head trauma. I somehow only broke my arm and had a concussion. Now in my 30s, it's led to a good amount of jokes of how hard-headed I am. Story 16. Being shot on 2 separate occasions, first time with 7 times, and the second time was 2 times. Still don't know how I survived. Story 17. Got hammered tipsy and was home alone. I live a couple stories up and have a balcony. I dangled my legs over the edge while sitting on the railing. Easily the railing could have broke, or I could have fudged up and everybody would have thought I eliminate myself, and not just that I was being a fudge moron. Story 18. I got hit by a car when I was kid, split my skull right open. Have no memory of it happening, but do remember a few minutes before leaving my house and then waking up on my couch to the ambulance crew taking out our kitchen table so they could fit the stretcher. I was trying to talk to my dad because he looked so distraught, and I was trying to tell him I was okay, but the words just kept coming out complete gibberish, which obviously only made the poor man more distraught, LOL. So weird though, because I had been out by myself on my bike, and when the car hit me, I apparently just got up and walked back to my house. It's strange to have a section of time missing. I was clearly in shock, though. Spent a few weeks in hospital, but all was good. Then, almost bled out both times I gave birth, so that was fun. Story 19. Falling asleep while driving on a winding road. Almost drove off the cliff, and it was one of those where there's no barricades on the side of the road. Story 20. Septicemia. Had surgery on my ACL, was fine for 2 to 3 weeks. Had my stitches taken out and went downhill 5 days later. Got rushed into AE 8 days after stitches came out, could have lost my leg and was coped to being very, very ill. Story 21. Not the latest, but almost got run over by a bus in London because I'm a Yank and looked the wrong way. Story 22. Ultra-high fever from a tick bite due to tick fever, medically threatening intestinal bug, going like a hose from both ends, consumed several gallons of liquid, including electrolytes over 2 days, and still lost significant weight, dangerously dehydrated once the meds kicked in. Story 23. They aren't joking when they say that peanut butter is dangerous to give to small children because they can choke. I was eating a spoonful of it as a little kid, and I remember it getting logged in my throat and I couldn't breathe. I'm gagging, trying to cough it up. Nobody in my family hears or notices. I just remember coughing and coughing, trying to dislodge it, then feeling myself getting weaker and weaker and collapsing to the floor, and then I started blacking out into darkness. I still don't even know what happened or how I didn't die, because I woke up on the floor and could breathe again with vomit in my mouth, and my family still hadn't noticed. Story 24. July 26, 2014. My ex-husband held a knife to me and forced me to take what should have been a lethal combination of sleeping pills, Tylenol 3, and my antidepressants. According to records, I flat-lined in the ER at least once. And then he had me admitted to the psych ward because he wrote a tragic end note and forged my name on it. Not even 24 hours before that, he and his son, my ex-stepson, tried strangling me to passing in front of my son. He had me arrested for defending myself, and they did nothing to him regardless of the handprints and him cutting the phone line so I couldn't call for help and kidnapping my son, not his child, all because he's a master manipulator. Story 25. 2 blood clots, really bad spot close to my neck, would have been a straight shot to my brain, and then another time I got pinned by an inmate. Story 26. A few times my guardian angels honestly hasn't had the easiest of time. The train I was on went over a bomb during a series of attack. This was the only one that didn't explode. One, I came so close to be hit by a car as a pedestrian. I only saw a blur of color passing at speed right in front of me. Blood vessel was leaking into my chest for a week after having surgery. I was told that the swelling was normal. Then it burst. Honestly, there is probably a lot of things that happens in life where one simple change could have meant a complete different outcome. For example, I was on plane going to London when 911 happened. Story 27. Preeclampsia at 7 months and had no idea. Emergency C-section and magnesium. Really lucky to be here. Baby only lived 1 month, but that was the best outcome for him, poor little boy. Story 28. Trailer sway pulled me off a highway and the truck I was driving went nose first into an irrigation channel at highway speeds. Physics is scary. Welder generator came 1 foot into the cab and was held by a steel tubing frame we built to cover the back window of the truck. Story 29. For context, before y'all go judging, I've been sober for 8 years. I decided to get sober a few days after my 3rd OD, which took a double man's worth of Narcan to bring me back to life. I came to life again, puked all over myself, yelled at the nurses for saving my life, went and got more substances, then got arrested. That was the end of it for me. I quit. Story 30. I went in the hospital with a headache, and they found a brain abscess, so I had to have emergency brain surgery and 2 months of IV antibiotics to remove the infection. Lost part of my vision, but it mostly came back. Needed 2 more surgeries in my lung where I had an AVM, which is where the infection got through, and to my brain, so they had to coil it. I was an otherwise healthy 31-year-old planning a wedding. That was probably the closest I got. Scared the hell out of a lot of people. They thought it might be a brain tumor before they opened me up. Got a nice scar as a reminder. Story 31. I took too many shrooms once and hit ego passing. I was panicking and thought I was gonna die. The cool thing is that I wasn't freaking out, I just accepted it. Story 32. I had a gangrenous appendix. It started leaking during removal. They said that if I had arrived at the hospital 2 minutes later, I would have died. Story 33. Being beaten up by my ex. This was the worst time. I was laying on the ground, my head locked, pushed into the carpet. I was being punched, suffocated, kicked all over my back, arms and legs. Not the face cause that shows. I had a kind of moment where it seemed easier to give up, as this was too hard to keep going, but as I had a new baby that gave the push, not give up. To just lay there, take it, and I left not long afterwards. I remember being so sore that I couldn't wear clothes as it hurt my bruised skin. Even a sheet hurt. Story 34. MTB accident. Thought nothing of it at the time. 2 days later on the living room floor in pain. Blood clot on my kidney. Rushed to hospital. Story 35. Almost got kidnapped walking home at 11 a.m. when I was 14. Never ran faster. Also almost died from an OD also at 14. Not my greatest year for sure. Story 36. My single days. I used to meet random women online for hookups. One time met a lady who told me to just walk into her house. She did not want her parents to know what was going on. I felt uneasy about it. I knocked on the door and pretended to be lost. When the guy was closing the door, I saw 2 guys in the house with guns. I did not sleep that night. Story 37. We used to jump off a 40-50th T bridge when we were kids. I jumped off, and as I was swimming back up, a massive log was submerged and passing through. Came a couple feet away from hitting it. Never bridge jumped again. Story 38. My appendix burst and stayed burst inside of me for 3 days before they finally figured it out and removed it. I was in shock with a temp of 104 and barely conscious for the last few hours before they operated. Spent 2 weeks in the hospital after that. I also had a kidney and bladder infection. Story 39. I survived the Widowmaker heart attack. I was gone for a while, but the ER docs managed to get me jump-started and breathing. Story 40. Adult beverage poisoning. I OD as well. But honestly, the scariest one was when I was welding in a steam drum and got electrocuted while sticking the electrode in the stinger while laying in a puddle. Shocking. Story 41. Car accident. Lost control going 70 miles on the highway, hit the brakes. Car turned 180 degrees off the road and slammed into a tree. The tree indented my car door and came very close to my arm. Walked away unharmed, thank you God and Honda Civic. Story 42. Bicycle accident. Missed a turn and ran into a tree. I got stitches in my shoulder and broke my arm. ER doc said if I had hit the tree any differently, it could have been my chest or neck, damaging vital organs or blood vessels. Edit. Grammar punctuation. Story 43. Got into an ATV accident, ran into trampoline at 30 mph, metal bar across my face, 3 fractures in my face, and then it rolled twice with me on it. Not wearing a helmet, I was told I should have died by the assistant director of the hospital. If my head was turned 2 inches in any direction, I would have... Story 44. Severe sepsis with septic shock, hypovolemic shock, peritonitis, and acute kidney failure all at the same time. Story 45. I don't think I was necessarily close to dying in theory, but this sort of pain made me wonder if dying sometimes hurt that badly. I had a probably huge ovarian cyst rupture once, and the pain was so unbearable I almost passed out driving, like could literally feel my body giving out on me and my eyes trying their hardest to close. In hindsight, the ER is where that should have gone, not home LOL. Story 46. Car crash in the womb. Mum had a bleed and doctor told her to prepare for the worst. Unfortunately, I was born. Story 47. I got perionitis after my hysterectomy. It was painful, of course, but I didn't think it was that serious until I called the ER, and they told me to come in as a priority, and then I was sent from the ER to the acute room and subsequently hospitalized. Story 48. I was 4 years old, and my father accidentally ran me over with a tractor. Broken femur and pelvis, laid in traction for a month in the hospital. I am now 43, and found out later I am unable to have children because of the accident. No other complications, though. Story 49. Fell asleep at the wheel doing 80 on the freeway after working a double shift. Woke up half a second before slamming into the divider. That moment, pure silence, white knuckles, heart punching through my chest, changed everything. Haven't taken life or sleep for granted since. Story 50. Hernia operation. Surgeon nicked my intestine, and they didn't find out until 5 days later, where I had internal organ failure of every organ, septic, and septicemia. Woke up weeks later with tubes in throat, up both noses and mouth. I spent the rest of the year fighting for my life, being hooked up to a machine 24 hours a day. Still remember a priest coming to see me saying, "Someone up there must love you, son." Worst year of my life so far in existence. Story 51. I went in a pool a few days after my dad died and just started drowning because the water pushed me to the deep end. It was a pool that had a shallow end and a really deep end, and I was short then. My family members were close to the pool but didn't come save me. Some random guy ran to help me though. My mum still blames me for it while I have a fear of water now. I genuinely thought I was gonna die because I couldn't swim. The most frustrating thing is struggling and everyone around you just watching like nothing is happening. Story 52. Being choked by an ex. He said he would make sure I never saw my child again. His eyes were completely devoid of life. Answer. I was frequently choked out as well. Luckily, I didn't have kids in the picture, but maybe it would have snapped me to reality. I relate to the eyes being devoid of life. I've never seen eyes get so black. Apparently, there's a science behind it. I can't remember details because the trauma association, but something with anger and heightened emotions can cause pupils to expand. I'm sorry you went through this, and I'm so glad you and your little one are safe. Story 53. We drove through a storm on German Autobahn. It was daytime, but it was dark. As the night we were driving on the right lane, and my mother said drive the left. We are between two trucks. If the one in the front hits the brake, we get sandwiched. The second we drove left, a tree fell on the road, just barely scratching the car with its tip. If we would have stayed right, the tree would have crushed our car. 4 people died in that storm. Story 54. Fell from a height of about 12 to 14 feet and landed headfirst on the bonnet hood of a car, out cold for 10-15 seconds. Guys with me thought I was dead. If it hadn't been for that fall, I'd be 5'12" today. Story 55. Fell in a pool and nearly drowned. There was no lifeguards because 80s. Was nearly on the Herald of Free Enterprise, ferry that sank leaving Zeebrugge Harbor drowning a lot of people. Was in a house fire that started late at night when everyone was asleep. No fire alarms. Again, 80s. Dad woke up smelling smoke and found the fire just in time. Tripped and fell on some broken glass, cutting my leg open very near the vital arteries down there. Bear in mind, these were all within about 3 years of each other. Since then, life has calmed down a lot, and the closest I've come is once slipping and losing. Move footing in the Lake District and bouncing about 30 feet down a mountain before coming to rest with my back against a boulder, which was next to a sheer drop. Checked everything was in place and nothing broken and carried on much more carefully. Story 56. I was alone and eating some dry chicken. I was really hungry, so I had too much chicken in my mouth, and when I tried to swallow, it was completely stuck in my throat, and I couldn't breathe. I ran around for a little bit until I stuck my fingers as deep as I could to try and pull it out. I puked, but I could have died because that's not what you are supposed to do. Answer. It might be difficult to remember this in the moment, but here's something you can do if you start choking alone. Find a table or a counter or another piece of solid furniture with a corner to it and position that corner between your ribcage and belly button, right where a person would put their fist when giving